Hey, what's up, Exit the Matrix family? Bob here. Hey guys, I hope you're having a great day. Thank you for joining me on this morning talk. So today, guys, I wanted to start it'll be probably a multi-part series or talk, whatever you want to call it. I really want to kind of do a theory of everything that has to do with our origins. And it's going to take a few talks to go through everything because we got to tie a lot of things together, and a lot of this is the secret of our origins that you're not going to be taught by our government, by your religion, and what's been hidden in history. And it's just information and connecting the dots that I've done from research pretty much since over 30 years since I was in high school. And I'm always constantly trying to kind of look at a large picture of things and different angles. A lot of people may just be into the ancient cuneiform and that's all they focus on. Some may be into more like the spiritual stuff or religious texts or ancient history, and I try to look at all that stuff in its totality, tied in with current politics and, stuff going on. And so it's going to be a lot of the stuff I talk about is going to be radical, especially for some of you that, really haven't delved into a lot of these subjects. I think it's going to open your eyes, though, and I think there'll be some stuff you agree with me on and some you don't, and that's fine. Like I said, these are just my thoughts, my theory, my kind of connecting all the dots. It's something I enjoy doing, and so yeah. So the first thing I want to tackle here, folks, those of you that have been following me, listening to me for a little while, you guys already know that I go back to the cuneiform, the older stories like the Atrahasis, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Enuma Elish, Enki and Ninmah, Inanna's descent into the underworld, and the stories and tablets that are over 1,000 years older than our oldest evidence of the Bible, of any of the books of the Bible, in fact. So and I know there's a misconception with a lot of Christians that they believe that the Bible's the oldest written book on earth or something, like it's it's the oldest story, it is the original source. And that's a very false presumption. In fact, it's not even anywhere remotely close to the truth. And the only way that some Christians that are at least somewhat honest about this will try to close the gap by saying, oh, well, that's because everything was passed down through oral tradition before they started writing the Bible, the books of the Bible. And so that's kind of, at least some of them will come up with that as a argument for, well, why the cuneiform's much older than the Bible, right? And to be honest, folks, I'm basing this off of cuneiform, which can go back as old as 4000 BC. So, thousands of years, multiple thousands of years older than the Bible. A lot of what the books I was or the tablets I was talking about are usually around 2000 BC. But however, archaeologists, linguists will admit that even those stories like the Enuma Elish and the Atrahasis, that they are even older than that, but that they're just in fragments in older cuneiform forms, like the Enuma Elish, the version everybody's used to reading is the Babylonian version, where Marduk is the chief, he becomes the chief god, he becomes the mighty one that destroys Tiamat. He fights for the gods, for the Elohim, for the Council of Anuna, and he usurps his father Enki as the supreme god, at least in that epic story. And the reason for that is because the original, at least The older version is Sumerian, and that names Enki as the god that defeats Tiamat. Marduk is his son. So the Babylonians made Marduk their chief god in Babylon. However, in ancient Sumer, or city-states of Sumeria, it was Enki and Enlil were the two main chief gods, the two warring brothers, right? So you can kind of see even within the cuneiform, which spans thousands of years of civilizations, right? From Sumer, through Akkad, through Babylon, through Assyria, through the Hittites, and on into the Canaanites. So there's a lot of stuff that I don't think people realize about that. But anyways, I think my point's been made. The cuneiform is much older than the Bible. And in fact, Sanskrit is much older than the Bible. And what's Sanskrit? Well, that's the ancient, the Hindu writings, the Vedic. Sanskrit goes back thousands of years older than the Bible too. And of course, that's where you get the Vedic texts and the stories about the Vimanas, the flying ships of the gods, and their wars in the skies, and these not a single group of gods, or not a single supreme god, but stories about multiple gods that were warring with each other, similar to the Sumerian and so you've got basically a parallel between the original Sumerian pantheon and the Vedic, Hindu pantheon. And all that matters, folks, because once again, this all predates the Bible. Okay, so I'm just trying to hammer that home. I can't believe the ignorance every single day on my page. Whenever I bring that up, that simple truth that even any legit, rabbi that studies the Old Testament will tell you the same thing, that these are based off of older writings. That the Bible is not older than the cuneiform. They understand that. And all that matters, folks, okay? Because it's going to tie into everything that we're going to be talking about. And so I just wanted that groundwork to be laid. And then something else, too. We're going to take an interesting turn in this, because I've done videos, folks, on all three scenarios of the Anunnaki. Who were they? What were they? Where'd they come from? Of course, you have the kind of the ancient aliens, ancient astronaut theory, right? That you see on like the History Channel, right? That the Anunnaki were like extraterrestrial, beings that came to Earth from another planet, right? And Zecharia Sitchin popularized this with Nibiru, that they came from this planet Nibiru, and that it was on an elliptical orbit that comes into our solar system, and then it leaves our solar system, or at least goes to the far outer edges of it, and that when it comes in our solar system, it causes mass disruptions amongst the planets in our solar system because of its magnetic pull and the sheer size of it, and it has a bunch of moons that are orbiting around it too. And there's some, and look, man, Sitchin was really digging into the Enuma Elish, and he was tying it to our own solar system, and anomalies like that you see, with our moon, with all the pocket mark, the craters on it, and of course the destruction of Mars, the massive canyon gash across it, and the lack of at least the lack of atmosphere and water that we're told, right? That we're told by NASA. Who knows, folks? Who knows? That's another argument for another day. So you've got that angle. These were extraterrestrial beings that came here light years away and, traversed the universe to to at least our galaxy to come to Earth, right? Like their planet was basically a spaceship that ride, and when it gets close, then they hop onto our planet and they do stuff for a while, and then before it leaves our solar system, they hop back on it and head out to the outer fringes, right? Well, then you've also got the more those that are a little more honest from the religious side, whether those be Muslims or Christians or Judeans, that will admit that yes, okay, the Anunnaki were in the Bible, okay, that they were the Elohim, okay, that they were the council of gods that's spoken about in the Bible, right? That Yahweh was one of these Elohim, right? I mean, in the plain language, it explains that if you actually understand what you're reading and not fall for the New Age BS about the Trinity, right? About the reason it's God's called Elohim, the gods, is because it's about the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. He's named, that it's gods because it's including the Trinity in that, instead of them being honest and admitting that it's talking about a council of gods. And that is the same council that's in the cuneiform tablets. They're called the Council of Anuna. It was later on that the Babylonians called them the Anunnaki, folks. And that was because of different changes to names and stuff. Anu being the Most High, the God of Heaven, the Father God, and his consort, the Mother God, the Divine Feminine that represented Earth, was called Ki. Anunnaki. From Earth they came. That's where that comes from. And it also can mean princely seed. And I love when people jump on you when you say the Anunnaki from heaven to earth they came. They're like, oh no, it means the princely seed. That's what the Oxford University says it means. Well, yeah, the princely seed, folks, the Anuna are the royal Anunnaki. Do you not get it? So, yeah, big deal. Like, that doesn't change anything. Yeah, they're the royals, okay? And this is important, folks. This is an important point to wrap your mind around. In fact, it's almost better to mean the Anunnaki means princely seed than from heaven to earth they came, because this is giving you the clue that these are the royal ruling elite of the Anunnaki, of these beings, okay? Now, their working and military class was called the Igigi. And this is all plain in the Atra-Hasis and other tablets. It's all established, okay? And they are gods also. It even says that in the Atra-Hasis, like that, work on earth was heavy for thousands of years. The load was on the gods, done by the Igigi. They were digging the canals, building the cities, raising the food, because they were the military and working class, what we would call, folks, the peasants or the tax-paying class, okay? Just like you and I nowadays. We're just a newer version of the same thing, right? Our boys, our daughters go to war for the ruling elite, the Elites, the Elohim. Get it? Look, they're called elites, folks, because it's the etymology. Don't you get it? They put everything in your face. The Elites, the Godites, they think they're gods ruling the earth, just like they did then. Okay? So, I hope this is all kind of... Look, we're just setting the groundwork here, folks, okay? So we got that, right? They're the ruling Anunnaki. They're the ruling of their race. Now, there's a third argument that could be made about who and what the Anunnaki were. And this is the one we're going to base this whole theory off of, because I'm starting to lean towards this one as more of a viable option. And oh yeah, folks, in the last one, I don't know if I went over that. I said interdimensional, right? That's why I was saying the theologians tend to lean towards the Anunnaki being interdimensional. That instead of coming from another planet or world, they come from a different dimension, right? From a spiritual realm. So that was the second argument. I just wanted to make that clear. So I don't, nobody jumps my case on that, And now this third one that we're going to use as our main premise is that the Anunnaki are actually, and I don't know, maybe the survivors of Lemuria or of Atlantis or of a much older, ancient humanoid civilization that was on Earth. That perhaps through their own warfare, their own technology, or natural cataclysms, maybe a pole shift, mass corona, ejections from the sun, an asteroid hit, a planetary body coming close, like Zachary Sitchin claimed, right? Nibiru, Planet X is what some New Agers would call it. That perhaps that was what wiped out their civilization. So this is the one we're going to go with, folks. And the reason why is because this is a lot more viable. Now, honestly, folks, it could be a mixture of all three. And the reason why, I almost think it's maybe more of a mixture of Atlantis or at least ancient civilization mixed with interdimensional is going to be very important as we dig into this deeper. In fact, I honestly think the extraterrestrial, the old school alien, they came from another planet or another galaxy type argument, that one's starting to seem less and less of a possibility to me. So honestly, I kind of think it's going to be more of a mixture between interdimensional and they came from the Earth, okay? And this makes sense, folks. Like, look, if there was a cataclysm coming and there was an ancient advanced civilization, which we know there was, because it's being proven now every single day by all of the evidence being uncovered, like the massive structures under the Great Pyramid, under those structures they're finding now with the ground penetrating LiDAR technologies, and look at the massive cities under the jungles throughout Latin and South America that are being uncovered right now, folks. And we know of this because you got the pyramidal structures all around the Earth placed on certain latitudes, longitudes, certain ley lines, and aligned to different planetary and star clusters in the sky, aligned with them. So we've already got the proof, folks, that there was ancient, much older civilizations. Göbekli Tepe and the other Karahan Tepe and the other Tepes sites are now pushing back as old as 13,000 BC. So we already know, folks, that our history is full of lies. They've been lying to us forever. The whole hunter-gatherer about 6,000 years ago and until now, like an evolutionary, advancement of humans and technology and language and everything. It's all BS, folks. Okay? The Earth has gone through many resets. Many resets. So now think on this, folks. You have an ancient, advanced civilization with maybe technologies more advanced than we even have now. And they knew that some massive cataclysm was happening. Or, like Edgar Casey talked about, the Atlanteans destroyed themselves. That they had these pyramids that were power plants, and they used massive crystals to generate like almost like a Wi-Fi energy, like Tesla was trying to build, and that they became unstable, and that there was civil war going on. Maybe it was even that there was attacks that happened to these structures, or that they were undermined, right? Like kind of like we got going on right now with these clown antifas running around, attacking, I don't know what words I can use on YouTube. Burning down, like food structures and power plants, and at least attempting to, right? Saboteurs. So it could have been saboteurs and that, caused these devices to become unstable. But anyways, according to Edgar Casey, that's what destroyed Atlantis, was these power plant devices became, unstable, and they exploded, and it was like a chain reaction, and it was so massive that it literally sunk the land that this civilization dwelled upon. But, it could have been other things. Asteroid, meteor strike on Earth, could have been the sun that caused it, or it could have been a pole shift. There's been evidence that there's been pole shifts in our ancient past. So there's a lot of different things here, folks. But the key thing to understand here is that the ruling elite of the Atlanteans or the Lemurians or whatever, well, maybe we'll just go with Atlanteans just to make things simple so we don't have to keep saying a million names and, yada, 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 right? The Atlantean elite, the rulers, the ruling class, the political class, the military class, the science class, the religious class, right? The high up people, right? They would have known this was coming, and they, just like would happen now, they wouldn't tell the populations, the peasants, the taxpayers, the worker class, the soldier class, right? They'd keep them in the dark, and they would start planning for their survival. Oh, and they would claim, it's the survival of our species, right? Of our civilization. We can't bring everybody into safety. We get only us, the elites, the rich, the powerful, the rulers. So maybe they were building structures under the ocean or under the ground. Maybe they had orbiting structures. Maybe they'd set up on the moon. We don't know, folks, exactly. We can speculate. But they went into hiding and they brought their scientists with them and everything. So they had their they retained their technologies. And they left the rest of their people to get wiped out as they went into hiding, into protection. And some of you, well, I think most of you can see the parallels right now we're talking about, right? Kind of like the U.S. and, Russia and other countries have been building underground cities and underground bunkers for damn near 80 plus years on Earth. And I'm sure this goes way back. I mean, in Turkey, there was that underground city uncovered that they said it could hold up to it was ridiculous. God, what was it? 60,000 people. It was so massive. Think about that, folks. And I think that structure go back to 3,000 BC. I'm sorry, I'd have to look that up, folks. I'm just going, look, this is unscripted talks I do, folks. Obviously, I'm driving to work. I'm just going off my memory and off all, so I'm not going to have every little detail exact, but go look it up. The massive underground city that was uncovered in Turkey, that housed up to 60,000 people. And why? That's the big question, why? They even had huge rooms designed to keep animals underground, agricultural animals. What kind of cataclysm were they worried about, right? And then, of course, we have now, which has become new to the zeitgeist, has been the whole argument over Tartaria and the mud floods, right? Perhaps the Earth had a massive either world war or some kind of a natural disaster that wiped out this grand, giant empire that was kind of a conglomeration of the Mongolian Empire after it collapsed, and of the ancient Russian, and kind of that whole Aryan part of the world that was all kind of coalesced into a massive empire, and that collapsed, and that's where the mud floods come from. Then you had the orphan trains of all these Russian children being brought all over the U.S., right, and shipped around on trains, all over the U.S. to be indentured servants and workers, for Midwest families and stuff. Look, folks, this has all been talked about. It's been hitting the mainstream for a while. It's been hitting the zeitgeist for a while. And it's very interesting, right? The mud floods, Tartaria. Was it real? Was it not? Who knows, folks? It's definitely interesting. So the point I'm trying to make is look, there's been cataclysms that have happened, and it's probably been a lot of world resets that have happened. And one thing is for sure, when the elite know something's coming, they're going to plan for themselves, not for you and me, for them. And we know that our own government does this, and they've got massive facilities underground. And if something like that was to happen nowadays, look, folks, me and you don't have a ticket to it. Now they all will, right? The top heads of religion and government, military, the politicians, the bankers, the oligarchs, the technocrats, and top scientists and all that kind of stuff. They're all going to be given tickets to go into these underground areas and wait out a cataclysm, while the rest of us are left up here to take the brunt of it, right? Without even warning, probably. Oh, until maybe like a week before. Oh, by the way, guys, sorry to tell you guys, next week a massive comet's coming in, or a pole shift's going to happen. You're all going to get wiped out. Good luck. Bye. And then slam. The vaults get slammed behind them, right? And we already know that all these billionaires right now are building their own bunker systems right now, right? Why? What is going on, folks? There's this new conspiracy theory that's popped up that now people are claiming all these data centers with up to 6,000. I even looked it up. Even AI will tell you the numbers, saying that being built and planned data centers up to 6,000 in the U.S. right now. Why? Now, I get it. We can go down the AI, the Antichrist system, look, folks, I get it. That's all part of the argument, right? But some people now are starting to claim that these are like our power plants that they're building, and they're being used to power these underground systems. And it's like they're hiding it in plain sight and saying, oh, it's for data centers. But really what they're doing, that these people are claiming, is that this is all designed. These are power plants being built everywhere to power these underground facilities, and that these data centers could be linking up with data centers underground to shift all of all human knowledge into a massive bank and store it underground in massive computers, so that if a cataclysm does happen, all of that stuff will be retained. Instead of other resets that have happened to Earth, when the Earth gets reset and we lose a lot of that information and technology. But perhaps, folks, that never happened before anyways. Because if these Atlanteans, the ruling class, the Elites, if they had known it was coming and they planned for it, they would have done the same thing. They would have protected all this knowledge. Like you've read right in the Emerald Tablets about Thoth claiming that he was an Atlantean priest, and that they had built these structures under the Great Pyramid and all that, under Giza, the halls of Amenti, to hide all of the knowledge of that ancient civilization, to be uncovered for future generations, to discover all of those ancient teachings and technologies and such. And that seemed crazy, right? But now what are they finding? These massive structures under Giza, under the Great Pyramid and stuff, that are like, go down miles and miles and miles, these giant tubular structures and box structures. I mean, my God, folks. I know people always poo-poo the Emerald Tablets. Oh, that was made up by the Dorian guy. I don't know, folks. Then you got Billy Carson claims that Emerald Tablets are like 36,000 years old or something. I don't know, folks. All I know is that the Hermetic teachings are legit, because they explain the quantum field. They explain basically all of the laws of the quantum field broken down into simple understanding laws. And it's not like it's some religious thing. It's explaining how this realm operates. And I've actually found that the Emerald Tablets are straight on. I mean, they are straightforward with how this realm operates, with how we interact with it, with the quantum field and everything. So interesting, right? I mean, if you haven't read the Emerald Tablets, though, like, folks, if you haven't read the Emerald Tablets, you're really doing yourself a disservice. I mean, you really are talking about some interesting information, right? You're talking about some ancient knowledge that's been passed down, that yes, the emerald tablets are probably not true source, right? But they're hearkening back to older information that was passed down. So, oh geez, folks, I'm at work, and right now it's been so busy at work. I don't have time to hang out in my car and keep going on here. We're gonna have to stop it for right now. Just keep in mind where we left off. We're leaving out. We've been setting the groundwork, and we are establishing that the Atlanteans, or the ancient Lemurians, or whatever, if there was, and it's probable because of all of our findings around the earth of ancient megalithic structures, but it's sorry folks, I'm trying to do something here real quick. Okay, that there was an ancient advanced civilization, and that they were probably from the earth, not extraterrestrial, not interdimensional. However, interdimensionality, I know I didn't say that right, will come to play in this kind of theory of origins, the theory of everything that we're going to talk about here in a multi-part talk. So, but establishing the point that the ruling Atlanteans, knowing that a cataclysm was coming, the ruling class would have planned for it. They would have planned to protect their technologies, their knowledge, their religions, who knows what all. And that, whether they establish bases or refuges, under the water, underground, or in the sky, or perhaps even on the moon or something, would have made sense, right? I mean, that would be the way to do it, to plan for something like that. And that we'll talk about what happens after the cataclysm happens here. And then and all this is eventually going to make our way back to the Genesis, stories that are tied in with the original cuneiform versions of the biblical story, right? And we're going to start building our story, our whole thesis on from there. So anyways, folks, if you guys got any thoughts into this, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to see what you guys think. And please, folks, this channel has been throttled ever since I joined YouTube about 2 years ago. 95% of the growth of this channel has been from external links to my Facebook page. And YouTube will not let this information grow organically. Or I should say, it's only grown organically. They won't let it grow through their own algorithms. It's all being pushed down. So the only way you can help push the algorithms up a little bit is by liking videos, sharing videos, and commenting. Even if you just say hi, hey, thanks. Or you could say, hey, you suck, I hate your video. I get those too, and I don't really care, folks. Like, I always see these YouTubers sometimes, and they're like, I'm so mean in my comments, I have to have moderators delete all the comments. I don't really care what anybody says. Say what you want, folks. Look, I have 100 arrows slinged at me every single day on Facebook because I go against religion and people's dogmas and their, programmed realities. And when you get people, you question those, people get upset, okay? People, there are people that are true truth seekers, and most of the so-called Great Awakened people are newbies to all of this stuff, and they're still caught up in religious dogma and stuff. And so when you question their dogma, they get really militant about it and upset, because they're falling back on patterns that they've been programmed into their whole life, perhaps born into, I mean, children that are born into some religions, they get baptized when they're a baby. It's like, you're baptizing a baby, like, come on. They never, what if they don't want to be part of that religion when they get older, I mean, it's ridiculous, but hey, whatever, right? So it don't bother me. So anyways, even your negative comments help push up the videos, like get more reach and stuff. So anyways, folks, I'm going to let you guys go. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and I'll talk to you later.